begin with some Canadian Premier League news. And President and General Manager of York United, Angus McNab, go onto his Instagram account. It is a very lengthy note, but when you read it, you go, oh, wait a second. He's actually announcing that he's leaving the club. And this, of course, comes from the commissioner, Mark Noonan, just before the championship game, when we were just asking him a bunch of questions about the state of this league and new teams coming on and in particular, ownership with York United, where he said, hey, in the next 30 days or so, we're really excited that we're going to be announcing, I believe it was a quote, a world-class new ownership group. So we're going to be waiting with bated breath on who that will be. But it appears whoever takes over, they will do so and probably need to look for a new president and general manager. So, Jordo, I'm going to start with you, a former York United player. What do you make of this announcement to part ways with Angus McNab parting ways with York United?
I think in some ways, respectfully, I think it was inevitable. I think the ownership group moved on and felt like the initial project and partnership with the club was no longer. And Angus McNab was kind of just in a limbo, what to do, where to go next. Also, when you're looking at new owners, and you know this, Andy, as well, in terms of when you get a team, you kind of want to bring people along that you know and that you trust. When you try to merge like the old and the new, sometimes it doesn't work out. I think with Angus, obviously 4 years with the club, you've seen so much turnover with the new name, new branding, players coming in like myself. Again, I'll always be grateful for the calculated risk he took on in signing me in terms of coming back home. But it's just this is a man who had a club that is in like the nucleus and the heart of football in the GTA. And I think probably one of his biggest downfalls was just not being here in New York, not being from New York and not being in the climate and really feeling that. And if you look at an Halifax coach that has done so well this past season, he was from the GTA. If you're looking at Bobby Smirnionis, who is a phenomenal coach in the Canadian Premier League, he is from the GTA. Like, I think if you're going to coach this York United team or any ownership moving forward, you just have to really get a feel for the area. Because if you do that, I think you have a lot of people really rooting for you. And that was probably his biggest downfall. But you hate to see people go. But I think it was just time for new blood, fresh blood to really attack this club.
Yeah, and Ollie, he oversaw tenure that wasn't the easiest for York United. I mean, yes, they ended up making the playoffs and they'd done so the year before, but they've been through coaching changes. They're still struggling to find that venue. We know they don't want to be playing at a York University. They want their own, specific venue. They want it to be more accessible to fans. They did the rebranding. They used to be York 9, then York United. And I mean, what do you make of the announcement as well, Ollie? And just, how do you kind of rate his performance as well as York United's president and general manager?
Well, I think the first thing you have to say is that you can make a case that it would have been difficult for anyone to have a really high level of success at York United over the past few years. Certainly this season, obviously, the ownership situation became unstable. I think throughout the club's history, to be honest, it just hasn't really hit or found its home, found its community, market, or whatever word you want to use, in the way that, the intention was when the club was launched at the start of the Canadian Premier League. And it's always been in that kind of sense of limbo of, where are we moving to if we're moving at all? Where's our permanent home going to be now? Who is our long-term owner going to be? And what's that going to look like? So those are some very difficult circumstances to operate in. I think there were positives and negatives throughout his tenure. I think the positives were mostly, I would say, in terms of the off-pitch stuff. I think the matchday experience at York Lions Stadium, which is a far from ideal venue, if we're being honest, got a lot better this season. I thought in particular it was much better than it has been before. I think everything around, the rebrands, the kits, the presentation of the team got more professional, looked better over the past 2 or 3 years than it maybe did at the outset. I was impressed with a lot of the things they did there. And then on the more negative side, I think, it's what Jordan alluded to there, which is just this feeling, I think, for a lot of people in soccer around the GTA and in York region, that this club didn't really lean into that kind of homegrown identity in maybe the way it could have. And there hasn't been success that's followed on the pitch in the way that anyone would have hoped. You go through their seasons, 34 points, 36 points, 34 points, 38 points. It's been, mostly the same every year. No playoff wins yet. Maybe not again, taking advantage of some of the talent that's right there at their disposal. Jordan mentioned Halifax. You look at the type of player Massimo Ferrin's been, again, coming out of League One Ontario, coming out of this area of the country, and then going and playing in Halifax. So I think there are some fair criticisms to be had on that front, but I do still come back to the fact that, like, until you get that stable ownership, until you get that permanent home stadium, you're kind of treading water a little bit with York United. And I think there's been some real challenges there to deal with.
Wheels?
A lot of my thoughts are similar. I don't really know the guy, but I know people that do know him very well, and he's well thought of. He's held in high regard. So I do think it's a loss that to a certain degree. But to Jordan's point, Jordan, I believe he lived in Brooklyn, worked out of New York City. Very difficult. Like that. I know that we live in a time of, virtual workspaces and working from abroad, but if you really want to be part of the day-to-day pulse of a community club, and that's what the successful ones are in the Canadian Premier League, you really need to live it. You just really need to experience it. Yeah. And the off-field stuff, yeah, you could put together great marketing campaigns. I think the comms team, the content that York United put out, it's top-notch. And some of the things that they've done off the field, they're doing what they can. And I think they've done a really good job, and the individuals that front that, including Angus, deserve a lot of credit there. But seemingly the one area that you can or you could control was how the team worked from an on-field product. Because whether it's recruitment, taking advantage of the space that you live in, it was underwhelming overall. The overall record of York United over the course of the 3+ island games, 30 wins, 28 draws, 33 losses. It's just average right across the board. 109 goals scored, 127 conceded. In 2022, they went 6 games without scoring a goal. Jordan was part of that team. They scored 1 goal in 9. And a number of players who were brought in from abroad simply just couldn't cut it. So some of these state-of-the-art or new ways of going out and recruiting players did not work here at York United. All the meanwhile, living in the GTA, York United should have an advantage more so than any other club in the Canadian Premier League, because the recruitment's in your own backyard. And that's part of the miss when you're not living in that market. You're not going to see League One Ontario games. You're not present in that soccer actually being played ecosystem in this market to go realize the talent that's there. Like Massimo Ferrin is a prime example. Like how this guy wasn't a York United player 2 seasons ago, let alone going to Halifax and having the season that he has. And he's not the only one. Ferrazzo, go down the list of players who we look at week in, week out, and we're like, well, that player should be playing for York United, but they're not. And I think that was the greatest flaw. Yes, the off-field stuff made it exceptionally difficult, and Angus deserves a whole lot of credit for that. But the on-field stuff, I think it's a cautionary tale. Whoever comes in to take over, you need to understand the market that you're in and the players that are there and some of the opportunities that you can offer that maybe some others can't. So that's the only area. I wish him well because, again, he's highly regarded, clearly a smart individual, but some of the on-field things simply didn't play out the way that they should have in this market.
Anytime we talk about York United, I just give a little love.
You got that one
Especially Oliver Platt.
What is that? That's your background?
Scariest yet sexiest mascot in the CPL. Ollie, I'm curious if you've heard anything about who these new owners might be, because I think we're approaching the halfway mark. When Mark Noonan, the commissioner, said we'll hear in about 30 days, I think we're almost at 2 weeks now. Are we hearing anything about who this new ownership might be, and what do you think their top priority should be?
Yeah, not a great deal, to be honest. I don't think this will be the end of the changes. I think there'll probably be some questions around, will there be a total clear out in terms of the non-playing staff, so a new ownership group can bring in their own people. So we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. What I've heard is it's not a Canadian group, North American, but not Canadian. So it looks like maybe another international group coming into the league, but that's not confirmed. And we'll have to wait and see when the announcement hopefully comes imminently based on what Mark Noonan says. And it's a big undertaking for whoever takes it over, right? Like, I think there's potential with York United. I think the process of selling the club seems to have gone well, and they've been able to present that potential. But priority number one is where is this club going to play? Where is the long-term home, the long-term stadium? that this club is going to be based at, because that's what they're missing right now. That's what I think the foundational thing that every CPL club needs. And it's got to start there with whoever comes in.
All right, Jordan, how you feeling?
Yeah, Ollie, you're hitting the nail on the head. I think also too, probably Angus McNab, another downfall is obviously we talk about the fabric and how much there's so much talent. There's Brampton there, Mississauga close. There's a York region that you have to pull from where there is talent. But I think if you don't know the climate and these new owners that might come in and they don't know the GTA, is hire people or get people around the club that do. Use your village, right? Like my mother used to always say, "Oh, it takes a village to raise a child." I was a bad kid, so my aunties and everyone was chiming in. But that's what you need. You need a village. For me, I'll throw out a name like Akar Masako is Mr. York. I'm not saying that he should have the head coach job. I'm just saying that he knows the fabric. If you look at the men's national team, so many players that are playing right now were with Carm at a point where no one knew about them. Like he just knows the area. He knows the fabric of the GTA. He knows York. He's Mr. York. So get people.
Jordan,
like
players were calling for him. Like when Jimmy Brennan was let go, they were all putting out their endorsements.
You could go. Obviously, I'm biased because my favorite season with Paul Slattery, the grumpiest man in football, and Jimmy, it was great, right? 2021. But getting guys like that around in those roles, you have to use your resources. So whoever's coming in, that's one of the first meetings that I'm having is those guys, those names, and it doesn't have to even just be them, just people that know the climate and the rundown of football in the GTA. You have to talk with them because that's how you're gonna get all your ins and outs and moving forward. That's your in right there.
I mean, the model is, if it is, and I think we're hearing similar things, it could be a group coming from abroad coming in. Atletico Ottawa is the framework here. You know, people that have come across that understand what the club DNA and how to build that out, but they've embraced the Ottawa community. There's fusion there. There's synergy there. And that's the way that has to be. You can go on and build stadiums and find ways. They need to identify whether they're going to be a Toronto club or a York region club. Like what do you represent? That is so critically important, but these things can be done. These things can be accomplished, but in order for on-field success, you can sell on players, you can develop, you can really truly create a breeding ground of Canadian Premier League players that have an outlet to play in the Greater Toronto area. That's just so vital and so essential. And I think Atletico Ottawa has done the right thing. So there's a model out there to follow, and let's hope that this proceeds and pushes forward, and York United can fully reach their true potential, because I really do think there's some good potential there.